Opening quotes. The West, a great country, gentlemen, the place for a young fellow of spirit to pick up a fortune. Simply pick it up. It's lying around loose here. The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today, by Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner. How could the dead Archduke and his sarcophagus affect my life? The World of Yesterday, by Stefan Zweig. Part 1, Tony. Chapter 1, Pushka Gora. To our way of thinking, he was only a boy when he left the family farm for good. The year was 1903. This Slovenian peasant boy leaves the family farm in the Alpine foothills of Austria, goes off to the big city to study music, achieves his dream of becoming a concert bassoonist, and travels across Europe performing for kings and queens. By 1914, he has grown to be a tall, dashing, handsome man. He is having the time of his life performing with the opera in Paris. It is everything he could have dreamed of and more. Then, overnight, his world is shattered. Shockwaves emanating from Sarajevo and Vienna and St. Petersburg and Berlin reach Paris and upend his life forever. France and Austria are at war. Through no fault of his own, he is an enemy of the state. He was my grandfather, Anton Leskovar. He certainly wasn't the first Anton Leskovar. His grandfather was Anton Leskovar. His great-grandfather was Anton Leskovar. For generations, his forebears lived in the same house on the same farm at Stogovici 8, near the village called Pushka Gora, in the Duchy of Styria, then part of Austria, now Slovenia, a land populated by Slovenians going back to the 7th century. We won't go back quite that far. We will leap ahead to Grandpa's time, the Anton Leskovar born in 1815. His father was a farmer. His father's father was a farmer, and he grew up to be a farmer on that same farm near Pushka Gora. The Anton Leskovar born in 1815 married a young woman from a farm down the road. Her name was Maria Skledar. They had 8 sons. None did they name Anton. The last son, Valentin, was born when Maria was 47 years old. Then she died. Anton married again. His second wife was also named Maria. They had a son named Anton who died when he was only 7 months old. Our story involves the third son, Zherny. When Zherny was 25 years old, he married a young woman from a farm down the road. That was in 1871. Her name was Nezha Geyser. Zherny and Nezha are my great-grandparents. They married in a beautiful Catholic church high atop the hill at Pushka Gora, as did their parents before them and their grandparents and great-grandparents, and so on. Both witnesses to the marriage of Zherny and Nezha were illiterate farmers. The church book tells us that. Even though Zherny wasn't the eldest child, nor even the eldest son, he and Nezha settled on the family farm at Stogovici 8. I'm told his 2 elder brothers might have come to this country in the 1860s, leaving Zherny to inherit the farm. You might say Zherny and Nezha were raising children the minute they married, and that Zherny still had young brothers at home, the youngest of whom was 8. I was going to name all those brothers here, but I was afraid it might be confusing. You needn't worry about keeping track of all these names. The only one you need to remember is the next Anton Leskovar, called Tony. He was my grandfather. My grandfather, Anton Leskovar, was Zherny and Nezha's youngest child. He would not grow up to run the family farm at Stogovici 8, and he would not marry a young woman from a farm down the road. He was born at home with help from the same midwife who delivered his sister 15 years earlier, though she wasn't a certified midwife back then. The day after Anton was born, the midwife swaddled him, and she and Anton's godfather took him to the Catholic church high atop the hill at Pushkagora. It was a custom for godparents to bring 1 yard of fabric and a candle to the baptism. It was also the custom to give the first person they met a piece of bread. This was to ensure that the child would never suffer hunger. I wonder, did they not pass anyone along the way, or did they forget the bread? Anton was probably born late in the day, which is why he was baptized the next day. Babies were taken in haste to the church to be baptized, infant mortality being a real danger. Zherney and Nezha's first child, Teresia, was baptized the day she was born. Their second child, also named Zherney, was baptized the day after he was born and lived only 11 more days. I found no record of the death of their third child, Rosa, but since Grandpa never mentioned this sister, I suspect she also died young. Their fourth child, Helena, lived only 1 day. What a heartbreak for Nezha and Zherney, losing 3 children in a row. Of 6 children, only 3 grew to adulthood. The eldest, Teresia, born October 7th, 1872, Joseph, born March 9th, 1883, and my grandfather, Anton, born May 17th, 1887. Anton's mother was 40 years old when he was born. The new baby, Anton, was called Tony, possibly because there was already an Anton in the house, his grandfather. It is spelled T-O-N-E in Slovenian, but pronounced pretty much the same as in English. I debated whether to call him Anton or Tony as I tell you this story. I like Anton better. It sounds so continental, but he was always called Tony, so I'll call him Tony. Tony Leskovar. Tony was only 6 when his father Zherney died in 1893. This meant Tony's 77-year-old grandfather was the only man in the house. He may have been strong and fit since he lived to be 94. Even so, farm work takes tremendous endurance and strength. They lived in the foothills of the Alps with 4 distinct seasons and plenty of snow and cold in winter. 2 years after their father died, Tony's sister Teresia married Janus Geiser, no relation to Nezha. The farm was Teresia's dowry, with the agreement that her mother and grandfather could live there, and she and her husband would take care of them through old age. This was quite common among the Slovenians, if not the norm, and sometimes put in writing in a marriage contract which was registered at the parish church. Teresia and Janus had 11 children. 8 lived to adulthood. Their farm sat on a hill overlooking breathtakingly beautiful land. Verdant green hills sloped down to forests, a charming storybook setting masking the rigorous, never-ending work of planting and harvesting and caring for the animals, all to feed the family. Even the uncultivated land looked perfectly groomed, as if God sent his angels down every night to comb the grass. Such was the case throughout the Austrian duchies populated by Slovenians. Tony said the house was 200 years old when he was born, and that a beam in the main room had a date carved in it. The first 2 numbers were 1-4. He said there were many Leskovars around, but no relations. Their farmhouse, typical of the region, did not have an open fireplace or open hearth in the main room of the house, as was the case in other parts of the world in the 19th century. The fire was in the oven in the black kitchen, which was just inside the main door and was closed off to the rest of the house. The oven was made of chamois bricks and built into the wall, similar to a pizza oven, and was heated by burning wood. My great-grandmother Neja and my great-aunt Teresia cooked the food in the oven. There was no cooktop. The same wood-burning fire that heated the oven for cooking also heated a large clay block on the other side of the wall in the main room. This large clay block, about 6 feet high, 4 feet long, 2 feet deep, in the corner of the main room, was called a lončena peć in Slovenian, or a Kachelofen in German. There is no English word for it because, as far as I can tell, it does not exist in the English-speaking world. It was covered with ceramic tile, and there was a bench around it. It radiated heat from the wood fire inside, lit from the black kitchen, thereby heating the main room. In the cold winter months, the children liked to climb on top where it was toasty warm or sidle up to it on the bench. Since the fire was closed off from the rest of the house, there was no soot where the family slept and ate and bathed. The main room was about 12 by 12 feet. The family ate and bathed in that room. The grown-ups and babies slept there. The floor was dirt, actually packed clay, hard enough that it was swept and kept tidy, no doubt swept daily. No matter how simple the home was, the typical Slovenian housewife kept the house neat and tidy and clean. The entire farm was neat and tidy, no junk lying about. Neatness, tidiness, a love of beauty and order seemed to be inherent in the Slovenian DNA. A crucifix hung prominently on the wall, flanked by statues of the Blessed Mother Mary and Saint Joseph on tiny shelves in the corners of the room. On the other side of the black kitchen was a smaller room where the older children slept. There was no oven, no heat on that side. The door to that room squeaked on purpose to alert the parents should a teenager attempt to sneak out at night. The house was whitewashed stucco inside and out, with a thatched roof. The thatch was made from the bottom of the stalks of wheat grown on the farm. Everything was used, nothing wasted. Boxes full of flowers adorned the windows in the warm months. The windows were covered by closing the outside shutters. Their barn was next to the house. The pigs were kept there, pork being the main meat the family ate. Pigs have large litters and are easy to feed. They eat anything. The cow gave milk and pulled the plow. The family raised chickens for eggs. In winter, when the snow was deep, Tony might have used stilts to walk from the house to the barn. The house and the barn were next to each other, but they had to go outside to walk from one to the other. Nary a smell came from the barn. It was kept so clean, you wouldn't know there were animals inside. There was no electricity on the farm. They used oil lamps. Before that, they used candles. They grew grapes and made their own wine. Every year on St. Martin's Day, which is on the 11th day of the 11th month, at 11:11 a.m., the family gathered. The fermented juice of the grapes was blessed and declared wine, which the family imbibed merrily. Every Palm Sunday, the family took a bouquet of branches to Mass at the Catholic Church, high atop the hill at Pushka Gora. The priests blessed the branches. They put one blessed branch in their home for blessings on the family, one in the fields for a good harvest, one in the barn for blessings on the livestock, and they used one to light the fire in the oven in the black kitchen. The following Saturday, Holy Saturday, they took a basket of food to the church to have it blessed. This was food for Easter dinner, usually bread, ham, eggs, horseradish, sausages, and walnut patitsa. Patitsa is rolled similar to strudel, but denser. It is made with a yeast dough, sort of a cross between cake and bread. Tony's family made their own sausages and hung them in the attic. They raised bees for honey. They grew corn, which they dried on the corn drying rack, which was under a roof raised up off the ground to allow good air circulation. They ground the dried corn into cornmeal. Tony and his brother Joseph foraged for berries in the forest. Their farm consisted of 3 non-contiguous parcels. There were forests on 2 of the parcels. They had several acres of walnut trees. Theirs was a good-sized farm, 10 hectares, 25 acres. They had almost everything they needed to eat and stay warm right there on the farm. But it was a tremendous amount of work. There were, of course, things they bought or traded for, such as salt and shoes. Cobblers traveled from farm to farm in winter, repairing and making shoes. In the summer, farmers hired cobblers to help work the fields. Apple, pear, and plum trees grew near the house. With the plums, they made slivovitz, plum brandy, a Slovenian staple. One whiff can raise the dead and flatten the living. In late summer or early fall, they harvested pumpkins, lots of pumpkins. Everybody, young and old, helped pull out the seeds. They toasted the seeds and pressed them to draw out the oil. Pumpkin oil is black. They used it for salad, not cooking. They didn't eat the pumpkin flesh and instead broke up the pumpkin carcasses and used them as mulch. With apples from their trees, they made apple cider and apple cider vinegar. Salad dressing was pumpkin oil and apple cider vinegar. They had a second smaller house on the farm, about 100 meters down the hill from the family home, near the creek and forest. The wine cellar was there, built into the side of the hill to keep the wine at the perfect temperature year-round. It also served as a root cellar, there being no refrigeration, no ice box. In Tony's memory, no one lived there. Later, a tailor lived there. As for transportation, they used their wagon or sled, both pulled by horses. They drew water from 2 wells, one by the house, one by the barn. They turned the wheel which pulled up the bucket of water affixed to a rope. Next to the well by the barn was a wooden trough in which they poured water for the animals to drink. They rendered fat from the goose and used the goose grease to heal burns and cuts. They applied it to the animal where the harness for the plow rubbed the hide. They made chamomile tea. In the fenced vegetable garden next to the house, they grew lettuce, tomatoes, onions, peas, beans. Herbs grew around the perimeter. They hung herbs to dry in the attic with the sausages. Tony's first language was Slovenian, the language his family spoke at home. He also knew German, the language of Austria. In November of 1893, Tony started school in Pushka Gora. He walked. It was about a mile away. He was 6 years old. School started around the end of the harvest. Most children attended school for only a few years. To say that a successful man of Tony's time and place dropped out of school in 4th or 5th grade might sound romantic, but it isn't really accurate. Unless he was part of a small minority of children who went on to gymnasium, he was done with school. Very few children went on to gymnasium, which was a combination of middle school and high school, after which the students attended university. Girls and boys attended separate gymnasiums. The curriculum was rigorous: Latin, Greek, several modern languages, geometry, physics. Don't be confused by the name. Sports were not part of the school. The Austrian novelist Stefan Zweig observed about his time at gymnasium: one can make up later for neglecting to exercise the muscles, but the mind can be trained only in those crucial years of development to rise to its full powers of comprehension, and only someone who has learned to spread his intellectual wings early will be able to form an idea of the world as a whole later. Tony's life changed forever when he was around 10 years old. Somebody gave him a harmonica, and he learned to play it. He was hooked. He was not destined for gymnasium, though I doubt many Slovenian peasant boys at that time were, regardless of how bright. No matter, Tony had another school in mind. Once Tony learned to read and write and do simple math, he was big enough to work more on the farm. There was always a tremendous amount of work, chopping wood, plowing the land, harvesting the grapes, harvesting the wheat, grinding the corn, feeding the animals, making the wine, making the cider, pressing the dried seeds to make pumpkin oil, harvesting the honey. It never ended. They hired help during the harvest. Tony was taught to work harder than the help, to be the pace setter, a work ethic he never forgot. While Pushka Gora was the closest village with the church, the school, and a store for those things they didn't grow on the farm, the largest town near the Leskovar farm was the old medieval town of Petui. It went back to Roman times. The Romans built a settlement there because it was a perfect spot to easily cross the river Drava. Much later, Petui was vital to the line of defense against the Ottoman Turks. However, when the Habsburgs first ruled that area back in 1511, the emperor couldn't afford to fortify the town, so he sold it to the Archbishop of Salzburg. The Archbishop fortified Petui with walls and towers. The Habsburg emperor bought it back a few decades later, in 1555. After attacks from the Ottoman Turks subsided, the town's fortifications weren't needed and fell into decay. In the 19th century, a rich widow bought the castle and restored it. Petui is known for the celebration of Mesopust. People dress in current masks, which symbolize chasing away winter and evil spirits and celebrating the coming of spring. It goes back to pagan times and was adapted to the Catholic pre-Lenten celebration of Carnival. The Slovenians were a Slavic people who adopted the Western religion, Roman Catholicism, and the culture that goes with it. They were ethnic Slavs with a Western religion, ethnically Eastern, culturally Western, a crossroads in many ways. Tony and his family worked 6 days a week. On Sundays, they walked to the beautiful church of the Virgin Mary at Pushka Gora for Mass, about a mile away. The church sits atop a hill like a beacon seen from miles around. Actually, beacon does not begin to describe what a beautiful sight it is. Back in the late 14th century, a baron and his wife had a daughter who was born blind. One night, the girl saw a light far off. She told her father. He proceeded to build a church on the spot. It was to be one of the largest churches in Austria at that time, second only to St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna. As Tony told the story, 3 other barons helped him build it, and they all went broke doing so. But in the end, they built a beautiful church, said to be the most beautiful Gothic church in Slovenian lands. The church became a spiritual and physical refuge during attacks by the Turks. The people built bonfires around it to warn of the invaders. Fire was a help in the right place and a peril in the wrong place. A statue of St. Florian was erected next to the steps leading to the square in front of the church. Florian is the patron saint of firefighters. Wolves were a menace, a threat to the family's larder, that is, the pigs and chickens. If a wolf killed the pig, the family could be in desperate straits. To defend against this, they would tie a pig to the wagon. Tony would stand in the back with a rifle while someone else drove the wagon. The pig squealed as it was pulled by the wagon. The wolf heard it and came out of the forest, and Tony shot it.